Good evening, everybody, and welcome back. It's Friday night. That means it's time for the Creative Cranium. My name is Timothy Fling, and I've got a terrific group of indie creators to talk to you tonight. Before we start with the questions, let's take a minute and introduce ourselves so the viewers can know who we are. I'm going to start with you, Patrick. Tell us who you are and mostly what you're known for.
Hey everybody, I'm Patrick. I'm a comic illustrator. I'm currently doing a Kickstarter for a character that I wrote, which I'm very excited about. That's kind of my first foray into doing some writing. But a series that you might know me from would be Granite State Punk, which I did with Travis Gibb and came out through Scout Comics, as well as Travis's own production company, Orange Cone, as well as the Discordia series, which is now under the Bad Bug label, which I did with my good friend Chris Jerome.
Nice. I look forward to hearing more about your new works. I'm a fan of both those projects, by the way, so welcome to the show, Patrick.
Thanks.
Scott, I'm going to move to you next. I was pleased to see you were coming as we share a mutual artist. Can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you're mostly known for?
Sure. Yeah, my name is Scott Harris King. I'm mostly a writer, but also I do some art as well. And I have a couple ongoing series that run through Kickstarter, Crime Busters. I've got 6 issues of that out, and that's sort of like my ode to like Scooby-Doo and the sort of teen detectives. And then right now I have live the 4th issue of my fantasy series Quest, which is kind of my love letter to like Dungeons and Dragons and Conan the Barbarian and all that sort of epic fantasy stuff.
Great. Well, I can't wait to hear more about that. And Scott, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Next, let's move over to Philip. Philip, I met you through your agent, Jeffrey Haas. I have a high opinion of him, so I look forward to learning a little bit more about you. Can you tell us who you are and what you're mostly known for?
So my name's Phil. I'm actually a screenwriter in film and TV. I've got a project with Rick Scott, and I sold a TV show to Legendary back in the day, and a few things and a lot of things here in Australia. But in the comics world, I've actually just started my foray. Long time collector since I was a little kid. And started a new comic called Future Tales, which is like a reimagining of classic fairy tales, but set in a cyberpunk post-apocalyptic world. And the stories intertwine and grow on each other and tell one larger story. So that's really my whole thing, my first foray into Kickstarter.
Nice. Well, I sure wish you the best of luck, and I look forward to hearing all about it. Tonight we're going to have a topic, and I want to get some opinions and some thoughts from you all. Lately, the word on the street is that crowdfunding seems to be struggling a little bit. So I'm going to dive right in the questions. The first thing is, would you agree with that premise? Do you feel it is struggling or not? Patrick, let's start with you. Is crowdfunding struggling this year?
Yeah, I think so. I think probably last year too, but continuing to go down. And I don't know. So this is my first Kickstarter that I've really had any, creative control over. I've worked on bunches of books that have been Kickstarted, but generally speaking, I just let the writers or the production company or whomever deal with that kind of stuff. I'm happy to share links, but but yeah, I think so. I think
I think you might have a point, and maybe there's advantages to each, right? There's advantages to just being one of the contributing creators, and there's some advantages to being the publisher. And hopefully tonight we can shed a little bit of light on that process. Scott, how about you? Do you think the crowdfunding is struggling this year?
I think it is struggling, depending, I think, on where you are in the crowdfunding field. I think it's because if you look at the numbers overall, more things are being funded and there's more money overall being funded, but it's almost like it seems like it's sort of stratification a little bit. The big campaigns are getting bigger, and then everyone else is getting smaller. So for me and a lot of the people sort of at my level that I talk to, that I interact with, it's definitely been more difficult this year, and I would say the last half of last year than it was previously.
Gotcha. And thanks for that insight. I think you might be right on that one. Phil, let's move over to you. First off, do you agree with the premise? Do you think crowdfunding is struggling this year or not?
Well, I come from it from a different angle, because we created Wild North Comics, which as creators, we just got together last year to do our first Kickstarter, and we were successful. We got 300% what we were asked for. We delivered all over the world, and then our second one did even better. So for us, we have a bit of a bubble where we think, hey, we're doing great. but we did try one which didn't do so well, and that's when we realized we can't just go back to back to back. We need to build our audience and really connect with them. And so I have seen a bit of that vibe, that it has been a little bit more difficult, but we weren't around 5 years ago when it wasn't so difficult. So yeah, we're pretty lucky.
That's a good point. Well, it seems like we've reached a consensus there. So, one of the things on the show, we like to try and provide positive solutions and to see if we can come up with some ideas that might be useful for other creators. I'm going to start out with if you have any suggestions or things that you might have noticed that have worked. One of the most tried and true ones is, of course, appearing on podcasts, right? It's a way to potentially reach customers. I definitely would recommend Travis Gibbs' Thursday Night podcast. Of course, there's JD Calderon, if you know him, and JD Rosario also runs a creator podcast. Patrick, let's move over to you. In the podcast world, have you had any successes there, or is there anything that you'd recommend?
I do think that podcasts are really worth doing, even just not from a marketing perspective. Like, I've just done a couple. This is my second one now in a couple of years, and it's just really nice to chat with other people who are doing the same kind of thing. And it's, just in casual conversation, I think there's a lot of really useful tidbits to be picked up on. And I don't know, it helps make me feel more engaged with what I'm doing, because if I'm just stuck up in my apartment drawing stuff, that can be pretty isolating. So I think there's more than one reason to do it. But yeah, I don't know that I've seen any specific huge bumps from any one show. I don't know. Yeah, generally worth doing though. Yeah,
I would agree with you. And it's tough to find good ones. Scott, what's your 2 cents worth here? Are you a fan of podcasts? Do you think that helps?
Yeah, I mean, I enjoy doing them. I think it helps to get the word out. There's a certain bit of just general sort of, the idea in marketing is like, if someone just sees you one time, they might not remember you or take a chance. But if they see you 5 or 10 or on 15 different things, then they'll start being like, well, this guy seems like he might be legitimate. Like, this is a thing. I've seen this a lot. Let me take a look at it. And then from our personal level, for me, I find that my biggest fan base is other people that make indie comics on Kickstarter. So just appearing on podcasts, usually the most backers I get are the other people that I've just appeared with. There's no pressure for you three, but it's just the way it's gone, is that a lot of times I'll appear with people and I'll be like, "Ooh, I got a backer from the podcast," and it was one of the other guests. So I don't know. I guess I guess it's good that I'm making comics that other comic creators like. Yeah. So. But I think it's always fun to talk about comics.
Yeah, I think so too. And we live in a world now where streaming is a thing, right? And it's a little extra sliver of entertainment. So I'm curious to see what Phil has to say here, because we know he's a screenwriter, and podcasts could be considered as a type of press tour. Would you say that aligns with your work?
Absolutely. In fact, I've just been doing a few. I watched some on YouTube, the visual podcasts, but this is a very slick one. So well done, Tim.
Thanks kindly.
I will say, like, there's these 4 kind of elements that I think attracts people in, and we can talk about that later. But I think the marketing side of it is obviously an angle to it, but I don't know if we necessarily, going off Scott's point, we end up marketing to the same audience, because it's often the same audience listening to these podcasts about comics, or indie creators who want to get into the business. So that's great, and it creates a family. But it's about the breakthrough. How do we get into the wider audience that may not be those super fans?
Right. Yeah, I would agree with you, and I think that. Well, it's a 2-pronged problem, which, when I say the problem, I mean this is the right kind of problem, because I think I can agree with you all. We're all trying to find more customers, but how do we do it? And that's one of the things we're going to talk about tonight. I think podcasts is one of the solutions, but I don't think it's the only solution. And I guess my next thing is I'd want to move on to is I'm a little bit of a convention goer. Last week, we were talking about potentially the best way of meeting new customers is through comic conventions. So what I'd like to ask about next is, have you been to other conventions? Do you recommend it? And what kind of ones have you had success with? Let's start with you, Patrick. What's your 2 cents on comic conventions?
I'm a little mixed on conventions, actually, as somebody who is a full-time working artist, but kind of just barely.
Yeah.
It's like comic tables are expensive, and it can become a full 3 days of working what feels like 15, 16, 18-hour days. And then if you're paying for travel on top of that, just the barrier to entry for that is pretty high. So I've done a handful of shows locally-ish, kind of within 1 or 2 states of me. I flew to one last year with Travis, actually, for Granite State Punk.
Where did you go?
It was in Florida. So was it WonderCon?
MegaCon, maybe?
MegaCon? Yeah, that sounds
okay,
right.
Gotcha.
And that was super fun. And it was really good to meet those folks who I'd collaborated with. But in terms of, it's probably worth it to have done it, but I didn't make my time back on it, if that makes sense.
Now, when you say make your time back, do you mean just in the labor or also the cost of a table?
Yeah, just the whole, if I'm thinking about how much it cost me to go, and a lot of it was covered. We were sponsored by, or I was sponsored by the shop we had done a variant cover for them. And so it was especially low barrier to entry comparatively. But just if I think about the amount of time that I was there and I were to pay myself $20 an hour or $15 an hour or whatever, I didn't make that back.
That's a really good point. Labor is money, right? Time is labor. Labor is money. So, and one quick question before we move on: do you do art commissions at your appearances?
Yeah, I do. Although it's tough, because if you're going to do commissions, then it's really easy to just kind of shrink behind your table and hide in your book or whatever. And so that's kind of a double-edged sword too. I think specifically for me, I'm not going to do well at a show unless I do a good amount of commissions and or sell original pieces. And that's just the niche that I live in. But
yeah, that's a great point. Thanks for sharing that. For writers, it can be a little bit different. Scott, let's move over to you. First off, do you do conventions? And if you do, what is your strategy at the conventions?
Yeah, I mean, I love conventions, actually. I wish I could do more of them. Just physically, I'm just not able to do as many. But for me, what I found pretty early on is that the larger shows, kind of like the one that he was just talking about, don't really work for me yet. I just don't have the audience for them, and I just can't make the table back. So I focus on the smaller shows. I do a lot of little sort of local shows, library shows, or sort of mid-size shows, one-day shows, and I do okay at them. I'm not really making much money, but I'm able to sort of make table. So I really enjoy conventions. I do struggle to sort of convert those people into longtime readers. I have people that come in, they buy the comics at the shows, they're excited for it, and that's it. I may never hear from them again. And I have different ways that I'm trying to get them, sign up for the mailing list, or here's my card where you can go to my website and stuff like that. But for the most part, I don't know if they have enjoyed it. There's a few people that I see now that I've been doing shows for a few years, and if I'm doing the same show, I've got a show next weekend that'll be the third year in a row that I'm doing the show, I see the same people. So sometimes I'll have someone come back and they'll be like, oh, I got issue 2 last time and you have issue 3, so I'm gonna get that. But for the most part, there's kind of a disconnect for me between the convention experience and converting those people into regular readers or getting them to Kickstarter and stuff like that. And I have not been able to figure that out yet.
That would make a good topic for a panel. Yeah. So Phil, how about you? Are you a convention person? What's your thoughts on comic conventions?
In the last 18 months, we've popped down to a few around Australia, the big Sydney one, Supernova, and in Melbourne as well. Been great. It's been really good for us. It's sort of, as a new brand, Wild North Comics, we've sort of pushed our name out there. We've also lined up heading over to the US, sharing tables with Just Stolt or someone like that, who's another big Australian comics publisher. But you know what worked really for us? In our own hometown, we created Wild North Comic Con. We created our own Comic Con. We got a free venue. We put on a whole day. It was actually a few days because we had some animation stuff around it. Because we're, as a collective, we're filmmakers and animators and comics creators. And we had, the newspapers. We were on the television for news. We had people coming in, and that really boosted not just our sales but our profile. So doing a local one, getting together with a team, really helped us.
Nice. What a brilliant idea, I got to say, to start your own convention. I've often thought to myself that would be the perfect synergy, right? Because you could sort of link up with other people that are of like mind. But it's another one of those things. Well, hey, I just need to learn one more thing. It kind of goes on the pile, right? So that's one of the things. Hey, Dave, good to hear about that, man. I agree with you. And there's so many moving parts in a comic convention. Well, for example, I'm a big proponent of the Harrisburg Comic Convention here in Pennsylvania, my home state, and they have a volunteer staff. It's probably 20 some people. So these are no small tasks to accomplish this. So I wanted to touch on something Scott said, which is the how efficient is a mailing list. I'm a big fan of using a mailing list, and I've made just about every mistake you can make. I'll save my comments till the end, but I'll start with Patrick. Patrick, do you use a mailing list, and how do you draw customers to it?
No, I should do. Because like most of what I've been, like the way that I've interacted with comics as an industry has just been like work for hire, just like doing other people's stuff. And so, that is a full-time job in and of itself. And so like doing a lot of self-promotion, I just haven't really been. It's also like, I don't know, up until now, it hasn't been wildly important, I think. Right. But I am about to be launching a Patreon page, so I'm hoping to do more of that in the future, kind of using this Kickstarter and this book to sort of add that to the things that I'm doing.
Well, I'm going to watch that with great interest. Please let me know how that turns out, Patrick.
For sure.
So, Scott, how about you? Do you use a mailing list? You kind of touched on it briefly. How do you attract customers to it, and how has it worked?
Yeah, so I mean, I made a decision pretty early on to try and do everything kind of grassroots. So like I don't do any advertising, I don't do any paid advertising. And with my mailing list, I get a few people here and there at conventions and that sort of thing, but almost all of it is through the Kickstarter. So when I finish a Kickstarter, I'll send out my survey, I'll ask if they want to be on the mailing list. So I don't do any kind of like big giveaways. And I know there's people that do these online like things where they'll give something away and they'll get like 5,000 emails, join their mailing list, but they're people that don't actually know or care about the comic.
And plus collecting the emails like that, you might violate the terms, for instance, MailChimp. Are you talking about MailChimp, or what's your source?
I'm currently using MailChimp. It's a little bit harder than it used to be. When I first started, you could have up to 2,000 subscribers on your free account. They changed that so you have a maximum of 500. And like I said, because I'm basically just adding people that are already interested in my comic, that like I would go very slowly, but earlier this year, I finally hit the 500 limit, and I had to basically go in and identified about 40 or 50 people that actually never opened any of the emails I was sending. And I removed them from the list so I could add new people. So the benefit is that I have a very high open rate for a mailing list.
What's your open rate? What's your rate?
The last message I sent out after I got rid of those dead accounts, my open rate was 54%.
Wow, that's stellar. Good job.
So, I do well with the mailing list, but it's a very small mailing list because I only have 450 people on it, even after doing this for 5 years. So I always felt like it better to have people that are sort of, invested and passionate about it, as opposed to people that don't really care when you send them an email. So,
well, you're doing it right, man. I got to tell you, 54% is outstanding. You obviously got some people that are interested in your material, and it sounds to me like you're doing it right.
I hope so. It's hard whenever I hear someone else say, "Oh, they've got 35,000 people on their mailing list." I'm like, well, maybe am I doing it right?
Well, but before we brag about that, though, we'd want to see their open rate. Some of these open rates, some of them are under 10%, as you know.
Yeah.
So let's move over to Phil. Phil, same question for you. Do you use a mailing list? And if so, how efficient is it?
We sort of came to this a bit backwards. So in fact, it's from our Kickstarter that we started a bit of a list. And then, we can then continue that. And they seem to grow. And on our website, we started giving away, free 20 pages of a graphic novel if you join, or you can download this 30. I think one of them is even 30 pages, which seemed to draw some more people in. But I mean, I also subscribe to a bunch, and I'm going to be subscribing to Scott soon, so his will be 54.1% soon.
Nicely done. Yeah, and I would agree with you. You know, I used MailChimp myself, and I'm one of the guys. I recently moved over to Substack, which I highly recommend to other writers. I hover around a 38-40% open rate, and it's by far my best engagement with customers. By the way, I want to move on to social media, but before we do, we've got a great question here, right? This is from Dave, so we talk about marketing and what is your percentage basically? Like, how do you keep your focus on creating new works? I follow a writer by the name of Russell Nolte, and he says in most cases, most of us probably create 80% of the time and we market 20% of the time. He often says that's kind of backwards, because you could make the greatest work ever created, and the problem is it's difficult to get noticed. So maybe we should be creating 20% of the time and marketing 80% of the time. So Patrick, let's move over to you. What is your percentage of how you do it, and what do you feel the right amount is?
I'm probably like creating 97% of the time and marketing like 3% of the time. So that rings that seems like something I should be considering more. But it's tough. Again, from my perspective, it's like the way that I have been doing this so far is like very much like a blue collar, like clock in, do work like 9 to 5, do my job, which is draw pages. And that to like keep that business model up, I need to be churning out like, you know, a page and a half a day, or at least like every other day. Otherwise, you know, what am I really doing? And so that just doesn't leave a lot of time for marketing.
Yeah. And it's also arguably the part that we don't like as much, honestly, right?
Yeah, for sure.
I want to get other people to do it.
Yeah, right. So Scott, how about you? If you had to divide your time in percentages, how much percentage is creating and how much is marketing?
That's a good question, because you know, I like we talked a little bit before the live stream started. Like you, I kind of do everything myself. So I also do, I do everything with the printers. I do all the fulfillment myself. So from start to finish, other than the art, I'm basically doing everything with the publisher. So marketing, I would say that like it's not sort of like an 80-20 marketing creating split. It's more like a 20% creating and 20% marketing and 60% a whole bunch of other crap that I have to do as well.
Yeah.
For me, like marketing is, as I mentioned, I don't really do any sort of advertising. So for me, my marketing is, I decided to make it just sort of, I love comics. I like talking about comics. So rather than trying to sell stuff, I basically just talk about how much I love comics. I have a YouTube channel where I mostly am showing stuff from my collection, like my back issues and stuff. And then occasionally I'll talk about stuff I'm making, when it comes up. And with the idea that rather than sort of selling a product, I'm just telling people about my passions, and hopefully if they find that interesting and if it resonates with them, then they'll be interested in my project. So in a way, I'm sort of marketing myself more than the book, but that marketing is actually just me talking about comics. So it's not really a hard sell that way either.
Gotcha. Phil, how about you?
More comfortable. Like for me, I'm a lot more comfortable doing that than being like, here's this thing, you should love it, you should buy it. I'd rather say, here's some stuff that I love. And also, if you also happen to like it, then maybe you'll like this as well.
Gotcha. That's, by the way, that's a genius level marketing. We'll talk about that one next. But first, I want to hear from Phil. Phil, what's your percentage breakdown? And actually, let's split it up one further. Scott mentioned it, creating, marketing, and what I'll call logistics. Is your split, Philip?
Well, we would have started as a bunch of creators, like 97% like Patrick. But once we had our anthology, then it had to turn all the way to marketing because we had something, but there was no access. And I will say a key point is actually targeting your audience or finding who your audience is. When you have that niche audience, it's not just marketing it willy-nilly, because comics is not necessarily for everyone. So it's finding the specific thing about your comic or your project and who would be attracted to that. Those keywords. And we have a bit of a team, so it does help. I would say 50-50 is where we have got to. We're always creating, but once we have our projects, the big turn is into marketing, logistics. And for us, it's a little bit different because we do locally through Australia, but we push US and Europe. And in fact, I would say about 60% of our sales was in North America, including Canada and Mexico, and a big percent in Europe too. But I guess Australia would have been our second biggest just because we're connected here. But we had to target specifically, if you like X, then you will like Y, similar to what Scott was saying.
Yeah, and that's really one of the best techniques, right? And it'd be great to say that we came up with this idea, but corporations have been doing this to us for 10 years now. Amazon, hey, if you like X, you'll probably like Y. You can't even escape it. So it's valuable to find out what the customers like, but customers can be a little fickle, right? They can change their mind. This is my experience. Maybe yours is a little bit different. So I kind of want to steer the question around to social media, which, unless I miss my guess, that's probably one of the main categories that all of us use. So I'll start out with my opinion. Social media has gotten a little bit more difficult in the last year. The algorithm does not necessarily reward the indie creator. In fact, we have to sort of struggle to keep up with it lately. Additionally, with the advent of something I'm not too fond of, I'm against AI. I'll save my rant for another time, but I'm not a big AI fan. So I'm going to move it over to Patrick. Patrick, do you have a favorite social media platform and why?
I mean, anymore it's Facebook, which is weird to say. But that's where I get the most jobs from. That's where I get the most interaction. I used to, on I don't know, in 2008, 16, 17, 18, something like that, before Facebook bought Instagram, I used to do really well on Instagram. But anymore, the algorithm is just not actually showing art even. It's mostly just a TikTok knockoff, which is, I mean, whatever, it is what it is. And I suppose you gotta adapt. But yeah, so I don't know. It's weird to say, but Facebook's been the most useful one for me. I think X, Twitter, whatever, is mostly dead space. I used to do okay there too, but
yeah, it's lately people don't seem to love, I guess it's X now, but we still say Twitter, but that used to be the hot one, right? But it seems like no. Do you still use Twitter at all?
I do. I mean, I have one. I've posted some stuff for this Kickstarter, but I've gotten 9 Actually, that's not entirely true. I connected with somebody who I did a cross promo with just today in my updates, actually. So it's useful. And as soon as I was using it a little bit more, my algorithm instantly started showing me more Kickstarters and indie comic stuff. So I think it's probably just whatever you like using most and will use the most is probably the best one.
Gotcha. And Scott, how about you? You're a social media guy. I know I've seen you around. Do you have a favorite platform and why?
I mean, my favorite platform is YouTube. I like the longer form content because I just like to ramble at length. For instance, since my Comic Quest is live now and it's a fantasy comic, I'm doing a lot of videos where I'm showing comics from my fantasy collection. I have a complete run of Conan the Barbarian, so I'm just going through all 275 issues and showing those off. And it just gives me a chance to, talk about how that's influenced my stuff. So I like the longer length. I'll say Instagram is absolutely useless for me. I have almost 700 followers. I post something on Instagram. It only shows it to 15 people. Right. What I'm finding actually a lot better for me in terms of engagement is TikTok, because I've been doing these videos. I'll post it on Instagram and it'll get 20 views. I'll post the same thing on TikTok and I get 700 views on it. I get a lot more likes and comments. So for whatever reason, TikTok is done a lot better for me than Instagram, but YouTube is really what I'm most comfortable with. I don't use Twitter at all. I don't have an account. I can't do that. But
if you want, drop your YouTube handle in the comments. You can put in the main or in the private, and I'll put it up for you.
Okay, sure.
Because I'm a YouTube guy too, as you guys maybe know. We're live on YouTube right now. That's probably my second favorite platform. I'm Substack first, YouTube second, and Facebook quickly becoming a distant third. Let's move over to Phil. Phil, what's your social media platform of choice? And tell us a little bit why.
So I'm not a social media guy at all. I just keep it private with my family and friends. But for something like this, we had to really jump in. And I would say we started doing things like a read through with the comic, top-down video with the artists and the creators, and we flick through and we talk about some of the pages, which we put on YouTube, which we're getting a lot of good response for that. Facebook ads, we boost. I think Facebook is probably our lead one. And I will say this though, and maybe this is a little bit of a secret. It's not really a secret, but the fact that our comic is a graphic novel and has like 10 different artists, each one of those artists, then their social presence becomes marketing, because then they push it out and it connects to the book. So we had like 12 different social media connections with people I would never reach all around the world, because my artists were from Brazil, Nigeria, France, Philippines, which was part of the concept, was to try to build a world out of this, and a connected tissue. So I think using your artists, using the people connected, everyone going out on social media is probably the key.
Good comment from Tank Ferret. It is true, there is a little bit of a toxic element toward social media and even comic readers and video games. It seems to be one of the ingredients in online life now. So, I'm fond of saying that there's really no such thing as bad publicity, but I mean, it is an element and we have to be cautious around it. I don't know what the answer is, but I don't think it's something that any of us are going to potentially do away with. So I want to steer the conversation back toward crowdfunding directly. It sounds like you guys are making some smart choices, and thanks for sharing your feedback. So am I correct in assuming that we are all Kickstarter creators? We are, yes. So my next question will be, have you ever tried one of the other sources? By other sources, I mean Indiegogo, Crowdfunder, there's Zoop now. Let me know if I got that wrong in the comments. Patrick, have you tried any of these? And if not, why not?
I haven't. And I guess because this is my first one. And also because the folks who are helping on my campaign, being Chris and other Mike and other Bad Bugs folks.
Yeah, give them a quick shout out, because this is I love those guys over there. The Bad Bug Media crew has been terrific to me, and I was thrilled to have you on the show when I heard about it. So shout them out, man.
Yeah, Mike Tenner and Chris Jerome have been super helpful. Mike did the logo for my book, and Chris built the page itself as well as doing the video, which was super helpful. Because again, the way that I've been approaching this is just my day job is drawing stuff, and then this is like an extra thing that I'm trying because I kind of felt like it a little bit, and I was excited about doing a little bit of writing. Have been for a while, and I kind of had enough leeway to try. So this was a good time to do it. But yeah, if it wasn't for their help and their infrastructure, there's no way that I would have done it, because I know that I don't have the time and infrastructure, and I didn't build the time. I build that infrastructure like a mailing list or whatever it is before.
Patrick, like we were saying, it's one more thing to go on the pile, right?
Yeah.
Eventually, we're going to get to that pile. We're going to all we got to do now is figure everything out. That's all that's left.
Maybe, yeah.
So one of the comments mentioned too, fund my comic, which you got. If you haven't heard that one, people are saying great things about it. It started as sort of like a grassroots. If I get any of this wrong, again, correct me in the comments, but it started as sort of a grassroots alternative to Kickstarter and quickly became one of the preferred sources. Like, it's got a really sort of transparent way to use it, and it's less fees, and even bigger name creators have used it a couple of times. That's Fund My Comic, which I'll probably check that one out myself. Yeah. Scott, how about you? So you're a Kickstarter guy, much like me. First of all, why did you choose Kickstarter out of the other ones? And would you consider another source?
Well, I mean, I've been doing this a little while, so it's been 5.5 years. And I mean, when I started, it was really either Indiegogo or Kickstarter. None of these other ones had really started yet, so they weren't options. I haven't really tried any of them. Recently, Kickstarter's added the option to have the late pledges, but that's a new thing. Indiegogo used to offer that. And they actually would offer it where you could, even if you didn't have an Indiegogo campaign, if you had a Kickstarter campaign, you could port that over there to get late pledges. So I tried that for one campaign, and I got $100 in pledges, and that was the end of it. I didn't really like the experience that much, and Indiegogo doesn't necessarily have the greatest reputation, specifically in the indie comics community.
Tell us a little bit what you mean by that.
Well, I don't want to get political here, but it has a reputation.
You can be general.
It's the place where the Comicsgate people have traditionally
I heard that.
gone.
I heard that too. Yeah.
So it was just something where to certain people, if you say I'm on Indiegogo, they assume you're part of Comicsgate.
Oh.
And so, but the main thing is that it wasn't really successful. And also, I haven't really tried any of the others because Kickstarter has infrastructure is not the right word, a community that the other platforms just haven't had a chance to build yet. So the hardest thing for me, and I think for a lot of people these days, is bringing new people in. And with Kickstarter, there's already an ecosystem.
Yeah.
One of the big things that I've done is tons of cross promotion while my campaign are live, like swapping campaign updates and telling people stuff, because I always thought that the best marketing is to get your word out to people that are already on Kickstarter buying comic books, rather than trying to convince other people to come to Kickstarter to buy something.
Agreed.
If there are already people on Kickstarter that are backing other comics, then they might back yours. So I've really heavily focused on the Kickstarter ecosystem, and the newer ones like Fund My Comic even, or Zoop, or these, they just haven't been around long enough to do that. BackerKit I would be hesitant to use. I have used them before in the past when they used to do the sort of, again, the post-campaign late pledges, and I had some issues with them. So they're not a company that I really feel comfortable personally.
Could you, and if you're not comfortable, you don't have to, but could you clarify what you mean by had issues with them?
Yeah, I mean, basically I had someone do a late pledge and from Greece, and I sent them the comics, which is extremely expensive, and then they filed a thing with their bank claiming that it had been that they didn't buy it. But this was a backer that was also to Kickstarter, so they had pledged on Kickstarter, and then they added stuff on, and basically the Kickstarter stuff went through, and I never heard anything from Kickstarter. But BackerKit was basically like, good luck, figure it out on your own. And I had to like try and submit information to Stripe directly so they could send to the bank in Greece to sort of dispute it. And of course, I just lost the money. He just took this stuff and ran. Whereas with Kickstarter, if they have those bank disputes, I never knew about it. They handled it all. And so BackerKit didn't really feel like it didn't feel appropriate to me, because they're the ones that actually took the pledge. Like, I don't even know the anything about the banking system. I just know that they went through BackerKit and ordered it through BackerKit, but BackerKit just washed their hands and just let me hang out to dry on that. So, I mean, it wasn't a lot of money, but it was, $45 or whatever. And
more so the experience not being the greatest.
Yeah, it was like Kickstarter, I felt like had my back in that situation. And BackerKit just, they were providing a service, but they weren't really providing a service.
Since you mentioned it, I will chime in. I only dealt with BackerKit once, and once you send one email, they very aggressively market you. And I said something like, hey, well, I've got some questions about this. I'm not sure I want to use it. And they said, hey, we'll answer whatever questions you want to have. It's a quick video chat, blah, blah, blah. And, I got online. I talked with the fella for maybe 5 minutes. And, man, the next week, didn't I get a bill for $100 for consulting something? And I was like, what? Like, they never – anyway, I'm not here to bash anybody, but it's something to be aware of. If I would have known it was $100, I certainly wouldn't have done it.
5 minutes?
It was – I don't even think it was 5 minutes. And, by the way, I ended up not using the service at all. So – it just felt like It felt like one of those things. Sometimes people send you an invoice in the hopes that you won't notice and you just pay it.
Yeah.
Again, that's one man's opinion. It's anecdotal evidence. I'm not bashing anybody, but it did happen to me. So let's move over to Phil. Oh, go ahead. You go.
I keep sending invoices to Google to hopefully pay me money, but we'll see.
Nice. Yeah.
So Phil, let's hear a little bit about your thoughts on the alternative crowdfunding sources. What's your 2 cents?
So I kind of come from it from the backer's point of view. So for the last, I would say 10 years, I would use Kickstarter as a bit of a storefront. I just scan through and see whatever catches my eye and pledge for things that I feel attracted to. So when we came to doing our one, it was absolutely going to be Kickstarter just because of what we've talked about, the community there. It feels like it's got a good reach. We also used it almost as a marketing tool more than as a sales, because we were already going to get printing. We could have done it all ourselves, but it allowed us to reach a bigger audience through Kickstarter, which then kickstarted our own marketing for the rest of the comic and ongoing. So I would definitely say Kickstarter for comics is great. We have friends who are working on other projects outside of this, but I would say board games and Kickstarters and comics. Kickstarter seems to be a really good place because of the pre-built audience.
Right. That seems to be a pretty solid answer. And I want to move on to see a little bit about what you guys are making, but we've got a pretty good question. Somebody mentioned here, Tank Ferret, where do you see your product in the general market? I'd like to hear some answers on that. So let's start with Patrick. Patrick, where do you see your book being in the general market?
Like in terms of like what genre it is, like what people would be buying it. Yeah. I mean, it's probably another issue. I'm not something that I don't think that much about. Like I just want to make the stuff that I want to make or write, whether that's writing it or drawing it. And I don't probably pay as much attention to how marketable something is as I probably should. But it's it's like a horror sci-fi steampunk amalgamation type thing. So if you liked, I don't know, Hellboy or American Vampire or something like that, it would live in there in that. But even so, I think horror is kind of a niche genre in and of itself, even though there's certainly some very popular titles.
Nice, good answer. Yeah, that's all stuff I like, man.
Cool.
So let's jump over to Scott. Same question. Where do you see your product landing in the market?
I mean, for Quest in particular, which is my fantasy comic, it's a D&D fans, really. I mean, I realized pretty early on making comics that I was making not just comics. I try and make everything something that I would want for myself, right? And then assume that other people will have similar interests. But specifically, I realized pretty early on that I was actually making stuff that my 12-year-old self liked. And so with Quest, it's like Dungeons and Dragons and Bronze Age fantasy comics, the stuff that I was reading in 1983 and 1984. And, when we show the campaigns later, you'll see I have one of my variants for Quest is a D&D module cover, but that edition actually has role-playing game pages in the back so you can play the story from the comic in your own home game. And that, even though that version, because it's bigger and limited edition, it is twice as much as the regular version, I actually sell as many of those as the regular one, and I sell way more of them at conventions. I go to conventions, and that's like everybody, because the people that are sort of D&D fans or just people my age, they'll walk by the table and they'll see the module cover and they'll be like, "Oh, it's a D&D module. I love it," and they buy it.
Yeah, that is a pretty cool one.
And it's kind of the same for my other series, Crime Busters, because I loved like the Three Investigators. If you're a certain age, you may remember the Three Investigators, but Trixie Belden and Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys and stuff. And so that's what I'm doing with Crime Busters. And it's a much harder sell at conventions, but it does pretty well on Kickstarter. And I found that my audience is people that are nostalgic for that kind of stories. I have a lot more female readers for that series. So yeah, it's, my market is basically people that are nostalgic for the same things that I am.
I think that's a solid answer. And both you guys had a good reference point of, hey, you're making things you love, which is step one, instead of making what the market demands. Let's jump over to Phil with the same question.
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Fast. when you said that it's like people who look like you or about your age who come up to you at shows to buy your stuff. That has also been my experience at shows. Like people who buy my stuff are people who are about my age and kind of look like, like are within some sort of a Venn diagram of me. So I think that that's actually a really insightful thought.
Yeah, there may be something to that. Phil, what's your 2 cents worth? First, who will like your product? And also he mentioned additionally, maybe even is there, prose adaptations or toys or games? And what's your general thoughts on it?
I think that's a good example for us. So Future Tales, which is based on classic fairy tales but set in a post-apocalyptic cyberpunk world, is IP. Like that's IP that is known all around the world. Everyone knows Little Red Riding Hood, Goldilocks, Jack and the Beanstalk, but haven't seen it in this way. And in fact, a little bit of a scoop, we've just pitched it as an animated series and have some pretty hot interest doing it in a style not unlike Arcane or even something like the Star Wars Visions, where every episode could be a different studio. So definitely how we fit, ours is an all ages story, and we do get a lot of younger audience for us, but we have had older gentlemen, people like myself who were brought up on these Saturday morning cartoons, and we just want to see cyberpunky post-apocalyptic. We want these cool worlds, but it's embedded with a character that people seem to know and has traditionally has been told in many different ways for centuries, and outside of just the European folktales, but all over the world. So we've got a bit of an angle in that way, and we definitely see it sitting in the market in that all ages sort of space.
Great answer. Thanks for sharing your thoughts. So, man, I'm really thankful we got an active comment section tonight. And first of all, thank you so much for the thoughtful answers and engagement. But I do want to talk a little bit about what you guys are making. So let's dive right into that, right? I've been taking a look at this campaign. This is Maggie Thorne #0. So before I walk into it, Patrick, do you want to start by, can I show the video?
Yeah.
All right, here we go. Very cool. Very cool. So start us off, Patrick, with your brief pitch on what the series is about, and also who will like this Kickstarter.
So first of all, I have to say that I didn't make that video, and it's I don't have nearly the ego to have written some of those things. But anyways, yeah. So the elevator pitch is that Maggie Thorne is about a woman who survives a terrible workplace accident, and as it turns out, it might not have been quite so accidental, but manages to gain some powers on a very cool robot arm from that accident, and then has to fight for her survival and that of her friends and comrades in this fantasy sci-fi factory that she lives and works in. So that's kind of what it is in a nutshell. And like I said, yeah, like stuff like Hellboy or American Vampire, or maybe even some of like the John Constantine runs. It's in that vein, cool. But maybe a little bit more. It's got more like a pulp action adventure vibe to it too, which I think is just fun. It's something that was very influential on me when I was a kid was the Hellsing manga. I don't know if any of you have read that, and so it's in that vein too. So, and now in this case, you're writer and artist. Yeah. So initially, this character was basically a B character in Chris and I's Discordia books, and I got to dip my toes into writing that a little bit, but it was just like a couple pages here or there in the back of some of our other issues. And so the Kickstarter is to compile all the previous stuff and then includes a whole new story. So yeah, it's been really fun to do a little bit of writing. It's definitely something I'd like to do more of. And I always find it the most fun to work, like to draw stuff that I've written. Like it just, I don't know, it's just so much easier for me to visualize how a page should be when I'm, or that's like I almost am writing it to draw it rather than taking something that someone has written and then figure out how to draw it.
Thank you, Tank. It does look good, man. I like the edgy art style and the subject matter. So this is live on Kickstarter right now. Let's do a quick call to action. Go over there and back with confidence. That's Maggie Thorne.
I just backed it, by the way. I just got your Discordia. So well done.
Thank you. Yeah. Cheers.
Thank you, Michael.
Thanks.
And did you say that Mike made the logo, the one with the gear?
Mm-hmm.
Mike Tenner?
Mm-hmm.
Well, how about that? I kind of like the logo too.
Oh, for sure. That's great.
I'm tempted to rip on Mike because we're a little bit friends, but in the case that people might not think I was joking, I will just say, man, cool logo.
Sure. Yeah. I got to give him props first, and then you can cut him down.
Yeah. Well, if it's well, I'll avoid all that because I'm trying to be professional. But they've been terrific to me over there at Bad Bug too. Yeah, Tank, I think you're right. It does have kind of that heavy metal AD aesthetic. So hopefully we can get some customers there. That's Maggie Thorne. I wish you the best of luck on that project, Patrick.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks. Really
So
appreciate it.
go over there and check it out. Next up is going to be Quest 1 to 4. Can you guys see that image?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. One of the things I like about this, I'm a D&D fan myself, and also we share a mutual artist, my pal Erwin. So I'd like to hear a little bit more about this. Scott, can you tell us a little bit about the project and who will love this project?
Sure. Well, I was about to give my spiel, but it's actually the tagline here. A ragtag party of adventurers are thrown together by fate and charged with an impossible quest to save their doomed world. And that art is by Erwin J. Rosa, who did one of the variant covers for issue 1 for me, and now he's come back for issue 4. And those are sort of companion covers. We're introducing like a new group of characters coming in this issue, which we see here.
I love the color.
Yeah, it was interesting. He actually did 2 different color variations for me. So this is the blue one, but we'll see further down. He gave me a red version as well. So I did a different variant where you can get the red one. So I wanted to use both of them because they were both so cool.
Nice.
And as you see, I think D&D fans of epic fantasy
module. Yeah,
this is when I do these variant covers, they're homaging specific modules. So in this case, a guy named Larry Day was the artist for the 1983 module called The Shady Dragon Inn. I try and find a module each time to homage that actually fits the story. So in this case, it's got that classic D&D, characters meeting at an inn before they go on an adventure. Every issue I've got like a 2-page spread in the comic, which is something that I got from Warlord, one of my favorite comics. Always had a 2-page spread. And so those are from the first 3 issues. And then here's the preview for issue 4, which has more of a the artist Lisa Wynn for issue 4 has got sort of like a more of an animation style. It's almost like a Saturday morning cartoon. If you're old enough to remember the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon from the 80s. It's got a bit of that feel to it. So yeah, it's just all the fantasy stuff that I love. I've sort of put in this into Quest. I try and write it like a D&D adventure. So like as the stories go along, the characters you can they'll kind of level up. They'll find better equipment. So like when you see them in issue 1 as compared to like issue 5 or 6 or 7 later on, the ones who are still alive, the ones who have survived that long, you'll see they have like better armor, better weapons. Like you can see them leveling up and they're going to be fighting harder and harder things. I wanted to really feel like a D&D campaign.
Yeah, that's cool.
You can see here the red version of Erwin's cover.
Yeah, I love it. That's really cool, man.
And I've done that trade dress. So again, nostalgia, but TSR had this series of like choose your own adventure books called The Endless Quest that came out in the early 80s. So what I do, I haven't seen a lot of other people do this, but I love doing it, is with my variant covers, I'll do a series of variant covers. So every issue I've got an Endless Quest cover that looks like a book cover. Every issue I do in the D&D, I also have a Bronze Age cover, so it looks like kind of like an issue of Conan from the 70s, and I do one of those every issue. So I have people that, you know, they bought all 4 issues, but they'll only buy this cover. Like they have all 4 of the whichever one they like the best. And again, this came about just because I wanted it for myself. I was doing the first issue. I just started screwing around with the artwork for the cover, and I was like, what if I made it look like the Endless Quest books? Because I have like a pile of them from when I was a kid still up in my, you know, in my office. And I did the trade dresses, like, oh, this looks cool. I want this for myself. So then I offered it up, and people liked it. So I do it every issue now. It's kind of what I do with all the stuff that I do. I just, what do I want in my own collection, and then, you know, I'll make it, and hopefully other people will want it too.
Gotcha. Very cool, man. Hey, quick call to action, right? You've got a strong track record of fulfilling your projects, Scott. So readers can back with confidence. That's Quest 1 to 4. Go over there right now and score some sweet D&D goodness. Plus, if you love Erwin Arosa's art like I do, I mean, how can you lose, man?
He's great. He did a variant for one of, I think, of Discordia issue 2, maybe. Super cool.
Yeah. Scott, I think it looks terrific, man.
Hey, thanks. I appreciate it.
So let's take a look now at some of Philip's work, right? So this is Future Tales. Can you guys see that image okay? You see that, right? On Amazon? Yeah. So Philip, same question for you. Tell us a little bit about who is going to love this project.
So Future Tales is a classic reimagining of classic fairy tales in that cyberpunk post-apocalyptic world. But the key here is really that the stories all interweave and tell each other. So each chapter is a classic fairy tale. Red Riding Hood, you know, Goldilocks, etc. tells that story, but it sets up the bigger story, and the characters show up in each other's chapters, all leading to fight the big bad wolf, the World Order Liberation Force, which is basically taken over. And that's the kind of exciting thing as a creator, making sure that these stories can all work together. And the great thing is, as I mentioned, we have artists from all over the world, because fairy tales are universal and versatile. So universality is kind of what I was playing with.
Oh, that's cool.
And you can go to our website as well on wildnorthcomics.com/Future Tales, and it has like a free little bits of the pages there, and I think you can download a bunch of stuff. But you can buy it on Amazon, obviously. And the good thing is, as a graphic novel, it tells one story. I think that's one of the benefits. I love just getting a floppy and one issue, but this tells a full story. It's standalone, 100 pages, art from all over the world. Yeah, it's pretty exciting to get out into the world.
And that's wildnorthcomics.com.
That's correct. And /Future Tales for Future Tales. But you can check out some of the other comics we have on there as well.
I'll just drop that in the comments real quick.
Yeah, we got some exciting things coming out, but at the moment, and I don't know if you can see, but the Future Tales, the fact that we went through Kickstarter, we got to do the gold foil title. We had some variant covers as well. JC Grant did an amazing cover. So we got to work with some amazing artists. And you know what? I've seen Patrick's work. I'm going to hit you up. See what you're.
Yeah, buddy. Cool. Yeah.
I knew him before a little bit from the Discordia series, which I also thought that looked like a pretty neat book.
Absolutely.
That was yours, right, Patrick?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, terrific. So check that out. Again, there's no risk whatsoever. That's on Amazon, or you can pick one up through wildnorthcomics.com. Good stuff, man. Yeah, we got some high-level professionals tonight, man. It's an honor to meet such a talented group of creators. I hope that you will show them all a little bit of love. So in closing, why don't we just real quick go around the room and in a reminder type of fashion, tell the viewers where they can follow you or to follow your work. Patrick, we'll start with you.
So you can go to Kickstarter and back Maggie Thorne, which is currently live. I'm also on Instagram at Patrick Buer Art. And on Facebook at Patrick Buermeyer.
Gotcha. Thanks for coming on the show, Patrick.
Thanks for having me. Yeah.
You're welcome. Scott, how about you? Where can the viewers follow you and follow your work?
Well, you can follow me on YouTube. My name there is The Classic Comic Collector. And you can follow all of the stuff I'm creating, but also if you're into back issues, I talk about. I particularly like put together complete runs because I'm a completist. So if
Nice.
you're into just watching someone, show you 500 issues of Avengers, I'm your guy. Or you can also check me out on Kickstarter. My Kickstarter quest is live right now. This is my 16th Kickstarter. And at crimebustercomics.com is my website. So if you want to check out any of the previous stuff, I just had a romance comic that I did a couple months ago. It's at the printer right now. So there's all sorts of cool stuff. So those are probably the best ways to find me.
Perfect. Thanks for sharing your thoughts tonight, and I wish you best of luck with your project, Scott.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Philip, how about you? You're going to get the last word tonight. How can we follow you and follow your work?
Well, I'll start by I just backed both Scott and Patrick's project.
Thanks so much.
It's great to be able to do that. I unfortunately don't have anything on live at the moment, Kickstarter, but you can go to Amazon and look up Future Tales by Tarl Denson. You can check out our website, and we've got some other pretty cool projects out there now, including some amazing art book as well. Another book called Dead City Lullabies.
Nice.
And some amazing
cool title.
Yeah, it is great. And the artist, he's the creator, writer, artist. He does music as well. He even did an LP for his Kickstarter. You can get with all his music on too. So yeah, there's a lot of good stuff. Go check out wildnorthcomics.com.
Nice. Well, I just want to say it was a pleasure having you all on the show. I wish you every success with these projects. Please feel free to come back anytime you want to promote something. To the viewers, thanks for tuning in. And of course, if you want to tune in next Friday night, we're going to be doing our UFO podcast. We're going to be talking about the Rendlesham Forest incident. So if you've got something kooky that you want to contribute in the comments, all the crazy people are welcome. I hope to see you next Friday night. So other than that, this is the end. Thanks for tuning in to the Creative Cranium. Good night, everybody.
Thanks.